push harder, hustle 24/7, manifest faster, grind until you succeed. These are the loud, exhausting mantras of the modern world. We have been deeply conditioned to believe that anything valuable in this life must be violently forced, aggressively conquered, and fought for with every last ounce of our energy. Society whispers a toxic lie into your ear. If you are not utterly exhausted, if you are not sacrificing your peace and your sanity, then you are simply not taking your future seriously. But I want you to pause for a moment and look at the actual results of this mindset. Look at the wreckage it leaves behind. Look at your own tired eyes in the mirror. How many people have completely shattered their minds and bodies on the altar of the hustle? We are seeing an entire generation consumed by severe burnout, crippling anxiety, and a tragic loss of their life force, all because they are constantly swimming against a violent current, forcing doors that are not ready to be opened. Over 2.5 millennia ago, an ancient Chinese philosopher named Lao Tzu warned us about this exact trap. He lived during the late Zhou dynasty, an era of China just as fractured and violent as the Japan that Musashi would be born into centuries later. Warlords carved up the land, armies marched for ambition disguised as honor, and in the middle of all that noise, Lao Tzu held a quiet, almost invisible position. He was the keeper of the imperial archives, a man surrounded all day by the records of kings who had forced their will onto everything around them, and who had, one after another, collapsed under the weight of their own force. Legend says that toward the end of his life, tired of watching the corruption of the court, Lao Tzu simply walked away. He left the capital on the back of an ox, heading for the mountains, intending to disappear from history entirely. A border guard, recognizing him, refused to let him pass until he wrote down his wisdom. What poured out, reportedly in a single sitting, became the Tao Te Ching, one of the most profound texts in human history, written not by a fierce general commanding armies, not by a relentless warrior fighting dozens of death matches like Musashi, but by a quiet old man who had spent his whole life simply watching how nature actually works. There is another legend, less famous but more revealing, about a meeting between Lao Tzu and a much younger philosopher named Confucius. Confucius arrived eager, formal, full of ambition. A man who believed that society could be fixed through rigid ritual, strict hierarchy, and the relentless enforcement of correct behavior. He wanted rules for everything. He wanted to force order onto chaos through sheer discipline of conduct. Lao Tzu listened to him patiently, and then, according to the story, told him something that left the young scholar speechless for days afterward. He compared Confucius's ambition to a man trying to drum up a wind with his bare hands, exhausting, undignified, and ultimately pointless, because the wind blows on its own schedule, not on the schedule of the man flapping his arms beneath it. Confucius walked away unsettled, reportedly telling his students that he had met someone closer to a dragon than a man, something that could not be grasped, predicted, or forced into any familiar shape. The two philosophies they founded went on to shape Chinese civilization for the next 2,000 years, locked in exactly the same tension you are feeling in your own chest right now, the urge to force the world into order, against the older, quieter wisdom of letting it arrange itself. From that quiet observation, he birthed a philosophy that holds the absolute cure to your modern exhaustion. The core of his teaching revolves around a concept called Wu Wei. In the West, it is often clumsily translated as doing nothing. But that is a massive misunderstanding. Wu Wei does not mean being lazy. It does not mean giving up on your dreams, abandoning your responsibilities, or lying in bed all day waiting for a miracle. Wu Wei means effortless action. It means action without forcing. It is worth pausing here to notice something that sounds almost contradictory at first. Musashi spent his entire life mastering rigid, relentless discipline. 10,000 repetitions, no excuses, no permission from his own mood. Lao Tzu spent his life preaching softness, yielding, letting go of force entirely. On the surface, these look like opposite philosophies. But sit with them a little longer, and you notice they are aimed at the exact same enemy, the tyranny of your own feelings deciding your actions for you. Musashi refused to let emotion stop him from training. Lao Tzu refused to let ego force him into fighting a current that was never going to bend. Discipline without flow becomes brittle, rigid, eventually self-destructive, exactly like the stiff branch that snaps in the storm. Flow without discipline becomes passive, directionless, an excuse to do nothing dressed up in spiritual language. The two philosophers never met, separated by continents and centuries, but they were quietly solving two halves of the same equation. One teaches you how to keep showing up. The other teaches you how to stop destroying yourself in the process of showing up. It means you finally stop fighting the natural rhythm of life. It means you stop violently forcing circumstances, timelines, and outcomes to bend to the strict, rigid demands of your ego. Right now, the reason you are experiencing such profound, crushing burnout is because you are fighting the universe. You are forcing and forcing and forcing, pushing your mind and your body past their breaking points until your soul is literally screaming at you to stop. You have forgotten that the most powerful things in this world do not push. They do not struggle. They simply flow. In Taoism, the supreme symbol of absolute power is water. Water is completely soft. It has no rigid shape of its own. It is completely formless. Yet, given enough time, water will carve its way through the hardest mountain rock. Water does not violently force its way through the stone. It patiently finds the cracks. It flows naturally around obstacles, effortlessly following the shape of the earth. But make no mistake, water always reaches the sea. Lao Tzu wrote something almost unbearably simple about this. He said that nothing in the world is softer than water, and yet nothing is better at overcoming the hard and the strong. Stone is stronger than water in any single moment you compare them. But stone has never once carved a canyon into water. Only water has ever carved a canyon into stone. Strength measured in a single instant means nothing. Strength measured across time belongs entirely to the thing that knows how to yield. You are experiencing such crushing burnout because you are trying to be the rock. You are trying to violently force the water to flow exactly where your ego demands. You push and you push and you push until your mind and your body simply collapse. Lao Tzu observed this tragedy and wrote a deeply profound truth. He said, "The stiff and rigid will break, the soft and yielding will survive." Think of a massive tree in the middle of a violent hurricane. The stiffest, most rigid branches are always the first to snap and fall. It is the branches that can bend, meld, and yield to the violent wind that survive the storm. Lao Tzu noticed the same pattern in something even more fragile than a tree branch. He pointed out that a newborn infant has the softest body in existence, and yet its grip is unbelievably strong. A corpse, by contrast, is rigid all over and utterly powerless. Softness in his eyes was never the opposite of strength. Rigidity was. In our modern society, we are terrified of being called weak. We think that if we stop forcing ourselves, we are failing. But Lao Tzu teaches us that constantly forcing yourself is actually the ultimate form of weakness. It shows a profound lack of trust in the natural process of your own life. There is one more idea buried in the Tao Te Ching that almost nobody outside of serious Taoist study ever encounters, and it might be the most important piece of all. Lao Tzu speaks of something called pu, the uncarved block. Picture a raw, untouched piece of wood before any carpenter is forced to shape onto it. In its uncarved state, that block of wood contains infinite potential. It could become a chair, a bowl, a sword handle, anything at all. The moment a carpenter forces a single shape onto it, every other possibility is destroyed forever. Lao Tzu believed that human beings are born as that uncarved block, full of natural potential, perfectly capable on their own, and that society spends our entire lives forcing us into smaller and smaller shapes, carving away anything that doesn't fit the mold of productive, successful, or driven. Your burnout is not a sign that you are broken. It is the screaming protest of the uncarved block, still buried somewhere inside you, against every violent chisel stroke society has used to force you into a shape that was never natural to begin with. To practice Wu Wei, you must release the desperate need to control everything. Let go of the toxic obsession to always be productive. Drop the heavy, exhausting mask of needing to look busy and on fire every single moment of the day. This does not mean you stop working. It means you finally start working in harmony with the Tao. You move with the correct natural rhythm rather than the frantic panic of your ego. Imagine two people trying to build something meaningful. The first person is the modern hustler. Day one, he wakes up to a screaming alarm, fueled entirely by adrenaline and ambition, and he loves how powerful it feels to suffer for something. Week two, the adrenaline has started to fade, but he keeps pushing anyway, mistaking exhaustion for progress. He forces himself to work 14 hours a day, staring at a screen, trying to squeeze brilliant ideas out of an entirely empty brain. He believes that without suffering, he won't succeed. Month two, his sleep is gone, his patience is gone, and the work he produces under that pressure is hollow, technically finished but lifeless, the same way a forced flower wilts faster than one left to open on its own. By month four, his body simply refuses to cooperate anymore. The creativity died first, then his health followed. He quits, not because the goal was wrong, but because he tried to be the rock for far too long and the rock cracked. Now look at the second person, the one who understands Lao Tzu. Day one looks almost identical from the outside. Same goal, same desk, same first task. But underneath, something is completely different. When her energy is high, she pours it out fully, without holding back. When her mind is exhausted, she rests in absolute silence, and she does it without a single ounce of guilt. Week 2, while the hustler is already starting to fray, she is simply continuing at the pace her actual energy allows. Sometimes fast, sometimes slow, never forced. Month 2, she has produced less raw output than the hustler at his peak, but every piece of it is usable because none of it was squeezed out of an empty well. By month 4, while the hustler has already collapsed and walked away, she is still here, not because she is more talented, but because she never spent a single day fighting her own nature. Move the clock forward to the 1-year mark. The hustler, if he is honest with himself, has gone through this exact collapse 2 or 3 times already. A furious sprint, a hollow crash, a guilty restart, repeating the cycle like a man convinced that the problem is his discipline rather than his method. She, meanwhile, has nothing dramatic to report, no burnout story to tell at a party, no breakdown to recover from, no dramatic comeback arc, just 12 quiet months of work that rose and fell with her actual capacity, none of it forced, all of it still standing. She quietly observes when it is time to move forward and when it is time to step back. Because she does not burn herself to the ground, she ends up outlasting everyone else. Modern science, without ever mentioning Lao Tzu by name, has quietly confirmed exactly what he wrote 25 centuries ago. When the body is pushed past its limits without rest, it floods itself with cortisol, a stress hormone that, in short bursts, sharpens focus. But that, left elevated for weeks or months without relief, begins actively breaking down muscle tissue, suppressing immune function, and impairing the very brain regions responsible for creativity and decision-making. The hustler is not simply tired. He is, in a very literal biochemical sense, forcing his own body to consume itself. Elite athletes learned this the hard way decades ago. The ones who train without ever cycling in deliberate rest do not become the strongest competitors in their field. They become the ones who get injured first, plateau earliest, and quietly disappear from the sport, while the athletes who respected recovery as part of training, not a betrayal of it, are still competing years later. Wu Wei was never mysticism. It was a 2,500-year head start on a biological fact your body has been trying to tell you the entire time. Lao Tzu said, "A good traveler has no fixed plans and is not intent on arriving." This does not mean you abandon your goals. It means you stop obsessing over the exact rigid path you must take to get there. Think about how much of your exhaustion does not actually come from the work itself, but from your white-knuckled grip on exactly when and how that work must pay off. You don't just want to write the book. You want it finished by a specific month, praised in a specific way, validated on a specific timeline you invented in a moment of impatience. You don't just want to grow the channel. You want a specific number by a specific date, and every day that number doesn't arrive on schedule feels like proof that you are failing, even though nothing about the actual work has gone wrong. The work is rarely what burns you out. The grip is what burns you out. Lao Tzu's traveler is not someone without direction. He is someone who has simply let go of the leash he was using to drag the future toward him by force and discovered, to his own quiet surprise, that the road arrives at the destination either way, just without the rope burns. He said something else just as important that almost nobody quotes. Those who flow as life flows know they need no other force. Read it slowly. He is not telling you to need nothing. He is telling you that once you stop fighting the current you're already standing in, the current itself becomes the only force you ever needed in the first place. If you are lying there right now, feeling the heavy, suffocating weight of burnout in your chest, I want you to try something radical tomorrow. Stop forcing yourself to be productive. Do what you can with a calm, focused mind, and let the rest simply flow. Conscious rest is an essential part of the journey. True power is not found in how hard you can push, but in how wisely you can let go. A river never screams at itself to flow faster, yet it patiently shapes the deepest valleys and brings life to everything it touches. Understand that letting go of the grip will not feel like victory at first. It will feel, for a while, almost like failure, like you are betraying the version of yourself that believed exhaustion was proof of seriousness. There will be a quiet, nagging voice telling you that rest is laziness wearing a disguise, that the moment you stop forcing, everything will fall apart. That voice is not wisdom. It is simply the old chisel still trying to carve you into a shape you were never meant to hold. Let it speak. You do not have to obey it. The block does not argue with the chisel. It simply stops handing itself over to be cut. Allow yourself to flow like water, not because you have surrendered to weakness, but because you have finally understood the Tao. Water has never once needed to announce how powerful it is. It has never needed an audience to witness its strength. It simply continues, century after century, patient and unconcerned, and the canyon it leaves behind speaks for it long after the rock has been forgotten. The frantic noise of the day is gone. Let the quiet rhythm of the midnight breeze carry away your need to control. You don't have to force anything anymore. Rest your mind.